Cherie, are we good?
Good to
Good,
go.
awesome. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. My name is Dante Fraser, and tonight I am joined by my classmates, Caroline Grady, Cherie Bragg, and Maggie Font. We're gathered here to bring to you all our social action project as a part of our Policy 3 course, is the Springfield College MSW course, instructed by Dr. Karen Clark. I hope she's somewhere in the virtual crowd. Hello. Today, we want to bring to you a virtual discussion on social emotional learning in schools with our SEL expert, Jean Conway. Please forgive us. Earlier, we noted that Jean was a doctor. She's almost there, but she's not there yet. And Caroline will go into more details about her bio. This event has been recorded, just so you all know, and we'll begin with a word from our sponsors at MHTTC and a land acknowledgement that will be led by Cherie Bragg. I'll then lead us into a 5-minute grounding exercise, followed by a brief moment to set our intention for the night, just before Caroline introduces our speaker and begin our discussion. So I want to thank you all for being here. We will have time for a Q&A a little bit later and a short survey at the end of our discussion. But first, like I mentioned earlier, I will pass the virtual mic over to my classmate, Cherie Bragg, and we will have a word from our sponsors and begin with our land acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dante. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to bring up just a couple of slides to share with you, or as Dante called it, a note from our sponsors. And bear with us with this technology. Okay. There we go. All right, as Dante let us know, this is Social Emotional Learning, or SEL, and we're so glad you're here. And you see our sponsors, New England MHTTC, with one of its partners being Yale Program for Recovery and Community Health, and of course, Springfield College and our MSW student. Just a brief acknowledgement for this evening's session. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. Of course, everyone knows in this field we have a million acronyms. The opinions expressed in the presentation are the views of our speaker and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Mental Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. The MHTTC network uses affirmative, respectful, recovery-oriented language in all activities, and this is particularly important to the work we do under person-centered planning. We invite you to join us in reflecting what language is the most strengths-based, recovery-oriented, as we exchange thoughts and ideas during this event, so we can grow in the ability to affirm and support others through our use of language. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We are currently on a Zoom platform. You are able to unmute and share. We are a pretty small, or not small, but cozy group tonight, so we don't anticipate any issues with that. We do ask that you please stay muted during the first portion of the event, where our speaker will be sharing slides and we'll be facilitating some discussion and Q&A. And there will be a period of time for attendees to ask questions. You can use the chat box, you can use your virtual raising your hand, or just unmute and ask your question at that point. And we'll let you know when that starts. It is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to attendees, as well as being posted on the New England MHTTC website. The QR code that you see on this page, if that's something you're interested in, we'll let you know a little more about MHTTC and the TTCs in general across the United States through SAMHSA, so feel free to take a picture of that QR code or Google MHTTC, or the Technology Transfer Centers. You can see other offerings that way. And then finally, we will be asking for your feedback. It's especially valuable to us as social work students. So if you could please make sure to fill out the survey. The QR code is here, the link is here if you want to pull it up now and put it aside for the end of the event, but it will also pop up automatically, just so you know. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I would like to read a brief land acknowledgement. And to start by saying that the land acknowledgement is to help those of us non-Native people remember that we are on stolen lands. I'm speaking to you from the lands on which I live and work, now referred to as Connecticut, on land that was unjustly colonized. These are the sacred homelands of the descendants of Indigenous people who have lived in Connecticut over the past 8,000 plus years, and is the unceded territory of the Quinnipiac, Tungus, Mattabesic, Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Pawcatuck Eastern Pequot, Scotticoke, Golden Hill Pagusset, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples, who have and continue to steward these lands throughout the generations. In addition, we acknowledge that Springfield College stands on the traditional homelands of the indigenous Algonquian people known as Agawam. The Agawam were closely related and diplomatically connected to the Quabog to the east, the Podunk to the south, the Waronoko to the west, and the Nanatuck, Pocumtuck, and Sokokee to the north. We acknowledge the memory of these indigenous nations who, after having inhabited this land for more than 10,000 years, were displaced in the 1600s to 1700s by English colonial settlers who exploited Native generosity and provoked warfare. Just a final reminder to put all of our words into action by spreading awareness of the rich history, unjust colonization, and inequities, of course, guided by our local Indigenous leaders and groups, and supporting the preservation and thriving of Indigenous peoples and their cultures everywhere today. Now it's my honor to turn the program back over to my distinguished colleague, Dante Frazier, to lead us in a brief grounding exercise.
Thank you, Cherie. Excuse me, I should have had some water before I started. Okay. There we go. Thank you. So I want to lead us into a brief grounding exercise. Please join me in sitting upright in your chairs. It would be nice if you were able to lay down, but if you can't, sitting in your chair is perfectly fine. Upright. This exercise is called a loving kindness meditation. It should take us about 5 minutes or so, maybe even a little less time. So I'll invite you to join in a deep breath with me through your nose and out through your mouth. We'll do that 2 more times. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And your last breath can be really deep. It relax you. Thank you. So please repeat after me. You can do this muted, or you can say this to yourself. I will begin, and you can follow. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be at ease and at peace. In this portion, you can extend your wishes to someone that you're thinking about, someone that you care about. It can be family, friends, anyone that's been on your mind or your hearts lately. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at ease and at peace. And now we'll extend our good wishes to someone that you might find challenging to extend good wishes to, but I promise it's good for you, okay? May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be at peace. And lastly, we can extend our good wishes to your town, your city, the whole world, or anywhere that you feel need this affirmation. May we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be at ease and at peace. We can take a final deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. Thank you. And at this time, I will turn the agenda back over, or I'll introduce again my colleague, my classmate, Caroline Grady, as she leads us into setting our intentions for the night.
Thank you, Dante. That was a nice grounding exercise to settle us in. I'm going to put a question in the chat for folks to answer. We are curious, what made you come to tonight's event and what interested you? So feel free to pop a message in the chat and I will read a couple. We'll give everyone a minute or two to respond. We have fellow classmates here, coworkers. You might have been a little bit persuaded by us, or you might have gone just out of your own curiosity. Awesome, Brianna. Intrigued by the title of the event. Jean, excited to be with our future social workers, definitely. Oh, thank you, Dr. Clark, to support my wonderful, gifted graduating students. Thank you for your support, Dr. Clark, with this project. Wonderful. So feel free to respond still if you're thinking of your response. Close the chat for now. And I'm going to pull up my introduction to tonight's speaker. So we have Jean Conway with us, who is a graduate of Northeastern University. She has her BS in psychology, her MSW from Boston College, fellow social worker, and her master's in education from Concordia University. Jean brings over 3 decades of dedicated service as a social worker within the Worcester Public School system, demonstrating her strong commitment to supporting students' social and emotional well-being. Through her experience, Jean has cultivated a deep understanding of the complex challenges facing youth and families, and is a strong advocate for resources to ensure equitable access to education and support services. So thank you, Jean. Oh, I'm gonna exit here. Okay. Stop share, and now I'm going to pull up our next portion of the event. We're going to dive into our discussion. Okay. So we have a series of questions for Jean tonight, and we will start with first couple and kind of just go from there and see how much time we have. But our first question, we kind of just wanted to know, so social emotional learning is such a broad spectrum, and a lot of people have different things in terms of defining it. So Jean, how would you define SEL in your own terms, and just kind of describing it to an everyday lay person?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for asking and having me here tonight. I really am excited to be with as I said, the future of our social work colleagues. I'm just going to premise this by saying that, of course, as we start to speak upstairs in my home, people are coming in and the dog is going crazy. So I apologize if you hear background noise for the dog. So her name is Dixie and we love her very much. But anyways, that's a whole nother story. But thank you for having me. So in layman terms for SEL, SEL has kind of had many different names throughout my career. I've been here in the Worcester Public Schools for about 31, I'll finish up 31 years as a school adjustment counselor and now administrator here for the Worcester Public Schools. And, it's had a long journey in regards to the work, but I think we're finally getting there. So in layman's terms for SEL, it's really about learning how to understand and manage your feelings and get along with others, make good choices and handle challenges effectively. It's like learning the ABCs of emotions and relationships and helping individuals navigate social and emotional aspects of life with confidence and competence. And that's kind of just the layman's, way of talking, but I'm not sure if folks here are familiar with, for the next slide, CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And that has been around for quite some time, like 20 plus years. And they have a very distinct definition in regards to their version of it. And that's on the next slide, if you want to pull that up. So their definition of SEL is social emotional learning, which refers to the process through which individuals acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feelings, and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decision-making. Now, to me, I don't know about you, but that's a lot of learning to do, right? And I think the whole point of bringing social emotional learning to the forefront in our public school systems or any school system is that we need to teach it. It's something that we need to teach. And it doesn't just come naturally. It's just like learning how to read. It's just like learning how to do math problems, which I'm still learning, quite honestly, but I'll get there too. But it's really an integral part of being a human being. And so, over the past several years, I've been happy to see the shift towards acknowledging the importance of that. And the next slide, if someone wants to push off to the next slide, kind of goes into the castle wheel, I'm not sure if people are familiar with that.
Jean, I think we're having a small bit of technical difficulties. Just one moment, please.
No worries. So I'll just kind of talk about that. So maybe in the chat, just answer if you're familiar with CASEL, the organization, and their framework. If you could just put yes or no in the chat, that would be helpful for me to know. So it looks like some people have heard of it, but not really. So as a social worker, I would strongly suggest that you become familiar with CASEL's website, casel.org. They have an incredible amount of information that can help to drive any practice, not just in a school, but just like life lessons in regards to SEL. And so if I were you, I would become very familiar with it, especially if you're going to be working in a school setting.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties. Okay.
No worries. It always happens to me at every staff meeting. I'll tell you, there's always some sort of glitch. And right now I have like my water heater going off, so I'll be on and off mute. That's
I
what it is.
appreciate it. So our next question, we wanted to know, can you speak to how social emotional learning applies to students who are struggling with various difficulties, whether interpersonal or environmental? And you are muted.
Yep, thank you. So really, the next slide kind of shows that there's everything that we do goes back to this question. SEL plays a crucial role in supporting students who are facing various difficulties for interpersonal issues, home issues, environmental issues. SEL provides a supportive framework for students to navigate and overcome interpersonal and environmental difficulties, promoting their social, emotional, and academic well-being. By integrating SEL into the educational practices within a school, that it can create a nurturing environment where all students feel valued and supported and empowered to thrive. If we relate back to that castle wheel, right? And we'll be talking, a little bit about that, but so there's 5 competencies that SEL competencies that they refer to. One is relationship skills, which is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships and to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. So if we're going back to the question, how does that support, help to support struggling kiddos? Just think about anything in a school setting. Everything is about relationship skills. From preschool to high school to actually to life in general after, in the workforce. So teaching our students and our youth, actually ideally from a very young age, how to be kind and how to be a good friend, and how to develop and maintain relationships is huge. One of the other competencies that they have for CASEL is social awareness, which is the ability to understand the perspective of and empathize with others, and including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. And again, think about a school setting. Everything is about social awareness. And if we can teach our youth, to be cognizant of other people's gestures and facial expressions and what they may mean from an early age, will help them with their relationships going forward. Another one of the competencies is self-awareness, and which is the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. So think about that in a school setting. I mean, everything that has to do with SEL is how our children and students and youth in our schools are at the lunch table, just walking into school, dismissal time, in classroom. It's all related. And once they acknowledge what their part of this relationship is and who they are and what they're bringing to it, have that self-awareness, it's really can be very impactful. Another one of the competencies, the 4th one, is self-management. And that's the ability to manage one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations and to achieve goals and aspirations. So self-management, think about a school with someone who's, going back to the question, someone who's struggling, and maybe they're highly dysregulated and they need to be able to calm themselves down. And sometimes they need some help with that. And that's okay. But, they need to be taught the skills in order to manage their own emotions. It's extremely important. And the last competency is responsible decision making, which all of us really need, in the long run anyways, but the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. So, think about a school setting there. At the lunch table, there's a bullying situation going on. That one student who's a bystander, what's their decision going to be? Are they going to be an ally, or are they going to be quiet about it, or are they going to join in? So these kinds of competencies and skills are things that we can teach directly, not just assume that they'll pick up on the intent of what we should be doing. So that's why it's so important.
Thank you, Jean. Cherie's going to help me with the next set of the slides. My MacBook was giving me trouble, so we will prepare ourselves for question number 3.
And of course, this never goes as smoothly as we think, so give me another minute.
No worries, it's all good.
Thanks, everybody.
So I don't mind answering the question. If you just want to ask it, I can, and then you can pull up the slide as we go. It's totally fine if that works for you guys.
That would be great. I think we're there now, but
Thank you. Awesome. Yep, we can see it. Thank you, Cherie. Okay, so we wanted to know a little bit more about what your experience was, Jean, implementing social emotional learning from start to finish. Was this more of like a mandate for Worcester Public Schools versus a suggestion? Were there already programs in place? Did you create it as it went, vice versa?
So that's a huge question, right? So when I first started 5,000 years ago, there was nothing mandated except what they used to call it back then, 30 some odd years ago, was character education. And they did have some structured lessons and so forth back then. But when I was in the buildings, and I worked typically on the elementary level because that's where my heart was. I love the little ones. And so when I was working with them, there was no one gave me any curriculum. No one gave me really, there was no, back then, there was really no direction for social work in schools. I don't think it was fairly new. And so when I found myself in these elementary schools and a lot of these kiddos going, really struggling to maintain self-control and so forth, I kind of just inserted myself after asking the principal into classrooms that were kind of struggling. When I noticed if I had lunch duty or something, and I noticed the third graders were really having a difficult time even just playing a game together without like fighting over everything, so I would insert myself into that classroom. And back then I kind of used Second Step. That's still around now and it's pretty good. But I would, or just throw together a lesson that I just kind of pulled together myself. And so there was no systemic approach to SEL, so to speak. And a lot of times the administrators just looked at the intervention as a way to get rid of behaviors or to help with behavioral problems, which it did in the long run, but I was also teaching these skills, and I don't think back then they kind of they realized that. But over time, I will say that the district has really kind of opened up more and more. Even before COVID, we hired a manager of social emotional learning, and that was a kind of top level, district level administrator who was able to be at the table when they were having big talks and bring in that SEL lens, and that social work lens. And so that was really something that I was excited about. And that was probably about 8 years ago. But our department, which is now called Culture and Climate. So we started off, the name of my department was Child Study when I first started. And now it changed to the Office of Social Emotional Learning. And now it's called the Office of Culture and Climate. But really, all of that is SEL, right? So anyways, so some of the work that I did back in the day was very, pulled together from all over the place. Now we have a lot of offerings that we have several different programs that we say to our building principals, we have this available to you if you want to use it. And so there's no consistent directive about you need to use this or anything like that. So that's kind of been a struggle, but we're getting there. I think it's better. This year, something that I'm really excited about, we did launch an initiative to promote adult SEL. And we're utilizing the train the trainer model. And they brought in our middle and high school administrators and their leadership teams. And they volunteered to do this. And so there was a handful of people. So probably we're a large district. So there's probably about 7 or 8 of our schools who joined. And it was great, but I will say that as the year went on and things got busier and busier, the administrators, they might not have come, but they would have sent people, you know what I mean? So it kind of was trickling away, but I'm excited because we have the train the trainer and now we have the stuff and we can kind of slide it in going forward. So I'm not sure, did that answer that question?
You absolutely did. Thank you. Wonderful. So were there any barriers that came up that you wanted to speak on as well that you didn't already mention, or we can move on to number 4?
So a lot of the barriers were that and I kind of talk a little bit about it later, but it's not a top-down approach, right? And I think a lot of times when people think of SEL, they think that needs to be clinical staff, doing it, social worker or guidance counselor or, someone with a clinical background, but it's not, so that's probably an ongoing barrier.
Thank you. That makes total sense. Okay, and then moving on to question number 4. So kind of a big one. What has been your biggest takeaway from this process? And where do you see the future of social emotional learning going? Do we need to improve SEL? Is anything missing from the definition?
That is a big one. And, through my experience with implementing SEL, I've learned that securing buy-in, like I was just talking about, you got to secure the buy-in from the leadership, or it's not going to stick. And so while some of our educators, the teachers, they naturally incorporate SEL into their teaching. It just comes naturally to what their lessons and it's so wonderful to see there's many, many, many teachers out there that have that skill set. And it's just I think it's innate. But there's others that require guidance and support with that. And quite honestly, the district level people and more so even the principals play a crucial role in fostering culture in their building that values SEL. And, thus the name of our department now, Culture and Climate, right? So ideally by integrating it into required lesson plans, additionally, districts should, provide professional development. We need to get better with that for the teachers because they need to be taught how to teach it. Because ideally having a school social worker, come in once a week and do a lesson and then leave. Ideally, the teacher should be kind of taking some time each week and doing that. And, all of the SEL curriculum suggests that to be honest with you. They say it should be the teacher doing the lesson so that they can incorporate all of the things that they talked about in that lesson throughout the week. They can interject, relationship skills by the way that they group the kiddos, so there's just so many ways that they can just kind of subtly slide things in. That's why I was talking that some teachers just do this naturally, but others don't. So we need to get better at, providing the professional development opportunities to equip the teachers to do that. And kind of the last thing that I'm kind of going to throw out here is the universities and the colleges, for teachers, they do not require, like a course in SEL. They don't require a course in behavior management. And quite honestly, I think at like a kind of systems level, I think that kind of work with the universities who are getting our teachers prepared to go into this field, because oh boy, it's a hard field. It's a really difficult field to be in. And if we can prepare them a little bit better by, giving them the skills for managing a classroom behaviorally and the importance of SEL, I think that would be just another way that I think is missing, something that's missing in the big picture.
Thank you, Jean. I'm now going to hand it over to my fellow teammate, Maggie, to take over the next set of questions. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Caroline. So one of the things, Jean, when we did our research, we found that some schools, when they were trying to implement, SEL, like especially during the pandemic, they had difficulty engaging the parents. So we want to know, how did you involve your community and your families in implementing SEL? And if you didn't, why not?
Right. Quite honestly, making sure that families are engaged in school, no matter it's SEL or not, is really the number one step in a successful student. Honestly, I think making sure the parents have a voice at the table is something that is essential. And, in my role, so I'll speak a little bit about like in my role when I was in the building. So in the role when I was in the building, if I was doing these lessons that I was referring to earlier, I would be sending out a letter to the parents from the class, and I would be communicating with them that this is what I'm doing. These are the topics that I'm talking about. A lot of the curriculum nowadays have like a parent letter for each week, for each lesson. Like they make it so easy. They really do. So you send home that letter so that you encourage the families to use the same language, like, oh, instead of smacking your brother on the head, why don't you try to use your words and be empathetic? He's tired. He had a really rough day. You know what I mean? So they can incorporate those words at home as well, so that everyone's kind of using the same language. So I always thought that was pretty important. I wanted the families to know that I'm in there talking to the kiddos, and this is what I'm talking about. One notable initiative that we're doing here in Worcester, that we did here a few years ago, that really, I think, helped to engage our community more so, and the families as well. And it was revolved around attendance. And, to me, attendance is, first of all, our attendance scores are linked to our accountability with the state. And that, we need to be accountable, but sometimes in an urban setting, the attendance is not like it is in a small, wealthy suburb, right? So Worcester, for those of you who don't know, I think it's if you're from, in the Springfield area, I think Worcester and Springfield are very, very similar. I think we fight back and forth for the second largest. It goes back and forth between the two of us. So I think that we really used connections with our communities of faith. We had some we had like a task force that had, you know, some of our very well-known faith leaders, and then we had some very like our public health people. We had just a whole smorgasbord of people who were invested in it. So like even if they went to the grocery store, like the local market, the owner, you know, could be like, listen to if a student came in, it's 9:30. Why aren't you in school? You know, and so like things like that. And our attendance really, it improved. And then the pandemic hit. So that was something that's something that I hope that we can kind of get back to. But I will say we also have a new superintendent who started a few years ago, and she, when she first came in, she started to do some listening sessions in different quadrants, different areas, different schools. And she had listening sessions with the community partners as well as the families. And a lot of the information that she gathered from that is driving our strategic plan, you know, for the next 5 years. And there was a big investment in what we call wraparound coordinators. I'm not sure if you guys know what that is, but so as a social worker, right, we know that we take the whole child, and we, you know, it's not just the kid, it's the family, it's the, you know, and you keep going out layers, right? So this wraparound coordinator is the person who's going to be able to help support the families on the outer layers, like provide, you know, get housing, which is something that the social workers that I would typically do. So this is really something that this position is really been a great collaboration between the wraparound coordinators and the social workers or school adjustment counselors. And you know, putting those two forces together, man, we can get these families you know, housing. Well, we try our best, but you know, all of those outside supports that will help to have our students come in ready to learn are so important. So we're every school has a wraparound coordinator now, which is fabulous.
Oops. Oh, awesome. Thank you. I kind of like it. It almost sounds like it's almost like it takes a village, right, to raise a child. So I like that concept, even including the local corner store.
Mhm.
Our next question is, what is your advice to social workers like me and my colleagues here, or school counselors who want to help implement, you know, social emotional learning in their school?
Yeah. So you know, I think it's much more difficult in an urban setting. So my biggest advice would be don't give up. You know, anything that you do is going to be impactful, you know. So just because, you know, many years ago when I went into a class and taught some lessons, that's the work, right? It doesn't have to be this big fabulous show, right? It's the little things that count. Um, you know, your conversations with with the students or the kiddos, your conversations with the families, and letting them know that you're sincere in your effort to help, you know. So and there's barriers. I mean, there are some districts that are better. Worcester is, we're getting there, but it can be really frustrating because you know that these things will be really impactful and really helpful. But you know, the system may not appreciate that as much. So just my biggest advice is don't give up. You got it. You're here. You went to this master's program for a reason. Don't forget it. Follow it.
All right, thank you. The next question is, what are some myths and misconceptions about SEL, and how is the larger mainstream conversation or social dialogue impacting current SEL interventions? So what are people saying?
Yeah. So there's a lot of myths, but so I just pulled out like a few that popped into my head when I saw the question, and you know, a myth is SEL is good only for children, you know, who are acting out of behavior problems. That's not true. You know, everyone benefits, we know this, right? Another myth was that it's the responsibility of the clinical staff in the school to handle all SEL, like everything, oh, that's SEL, that's emotional, that's you. No, it's you too, all staff, including, you know, including the principal, including the custodian, including the nutrition folks. It's everybody kind of coming together and being role models in a way too, you know. Another myth is that it's only for children, like it should only be in like preschool. I hear that a lot, like because preschool, that's kind of what they kind of do that. That preschool is kind of natural. Kindergarten used to be like that, but now it's all about learning to read, right? But it's for every child, it's for every human. That's why I was so thrilled that we were focusing on the adult SEL piece too, because if the adults have all of those competencies, those 5 competencies, if they're good at relationship skills, blah, 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 right? If they are strong in those competencies, then that's going to go down to their kids. It's going to go down to their, well, it's going to go to their teachers and the families, and then our students will get it. So everybody benefits from SEL. And the last myth that I kind of popped in my head was it doesn't affect doesn't have an effect on academic performance, but all of the research shows, and I probably should have listed a whole bunch of them, but I didn't. Research shows that academic support, academics flourish when our students are taught social emotional competencies directly. And if you go and play around on that Castle website, you'll see the castle.org, they'll have all of the research that backs that. It's a phenomenal website. And just to kind of, I'm just kind of read a little bit to kind of answer this question number 7 is, social emotional learning has gained significant attention in recent years as educators and policymakers recognize its importance in fostering students' well-being and academic success. Here in Worcester, even prior to COVID, we were becoming more on topic with SEL. As I mentioned earlier, we hired the SEL manager. The larger mainstream conversation around SEL impacts current interventions by shaping priorities. Funding allocations is huge. You know, with the professional development, all of the curriculums, they all cost money. And that also goes to policy decisions. I think this is a policy class that you're taking, right? So if you look at all of the funding that came from after COVID, you know, the ESSER funding and the ARP funding, those were federal mandates, you know, so when we have that kind of money and we're losing it now, we're feeling it, we have a $22 million deficit in Worcester coming. So the policy decisions are huge. As SEL gains recognition as a critical component of education, there is a growing pressure to integrate SEL into school curricula and assessment frameworks. However, this attention can also lead to challenges such as, you know, standardized testing. I constantly hear from teachers, I don't have 20 minutes to do an SEL lesson. I have to get these kids ready. You know, they have to take these tests. It also, the resource constraints that I talked about and vary interpretations of what constitutes effective SEL. So there's a lot of discussion out there of what's what's effective and what's good, which is great because at least we're talking, right? And the broader societal discourse on mental health and the stigma associated with, mental health and well-being and all of the different cultural lenses when we talk about mental health and SEL, all play a part in how we can do this in a way that is inclusive and also trauma informed and with an equity lens. So overall, navigating all of this is a big project, which is why I'm so glad that you guys are talking about it, because it's going to take some time. And now that we have the younger generation coming in, this will be something that we need your help with as well.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, one of the things you mentioned was about that. Most of the stuff that I read when we were doing our research was that this was more like an elementary, it was more for elementary kids. And now it's like, they're starting to like roll it out, at least in Connecticut, more so for like, the middle school and also for the high schoolers. And the great point about, the funding, because I'm from Connecticut, but I've been seeing that in the news a lot lately about the, pending layoffs from all the extra staff that was hired for school. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, going forward, which is unfortunate. So the last question is, also, if anybody has questions, go ahead, you can put them in the chat. So for you, Jean, is there anything else you would like to touch upon that we may have missed or we haven't discussed previously?
No, I thought that actually I kind of didn't even answer the question, because I thought your questions kind of were hit the topics. I think, yeah, I think you guys hit it with the questions, and I hope I answered it, and certainly open to any questions that anybody might have.
Okay, so then we'll just open up the floor to anyone. Dante's gonna come in and she's gonna pretty much handle all the questionings.
Thanks, Maggie. Now, I haven't seen any new questions in the chat so far, but this is the perfect time to do so. If you're not comfortable with your question, you can either send them to myself or my classmates, and we will go ahead and let Jean know what your question is so we can get your personal questions answered. Feel free to also use the raise hand feature if you are on a computer, just like that. Dr. Clark has a question, so we will start with her. Go for it.
This was great, you guys. Really, really, really good job. I'm so happy that this came together so well. Jean, so nice to meet you virtually. I don't know if you remember our phone call 4 years ago. It was the first week in March. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm going to tell you this because I'll tell you why I want to say this. It was March of 2020. It was a Friday, and I think it was Friday, March 6th of 2020.
Let me pull my calendar up and see.
It's so poignant to me because of the many reasons, but it was a Friday. I was calling a school, looking for someone who could help me make a referral for a student that wanted to have her second year field placement in the Worcester Public School system. And, she was really, as so many students are, it was something that she really felt she wanted to make, see some advances made. So I said, well, let me call today and see who I can find for you. We'd place students, in many Worcester public schools in the past, but our person had left. So I called a number and you picked up, and it was Friday at like 3:30. And you were so helpful. And you provided me with the guidance that I was able to provide to the student. And it worked out very well. And she was brought on. And I do think that she was actually retained. And she's now a school adjustment counselor. I think you know who I'm talking about.
I think
do you remember?
so. I think so.
And I think it just speaks volumes, Jean, about your work ethic and the fact that as a social worker, you embrace the many hats that we wear. Right? Friday afternoon, 3:30, phone was ringing and you picked it up. And you didn't say, please call me Monday or please eat me. You were very willing to engage with me in a conversation. And then all of our worlds turned upside down the following week, right?
Right, right. Oh, boy.
But this student was still nonetheless brought on, and she was remote with you guys for that year. I think you were remote. It's really all a blur. Were you remote for the academic year 2021?
2021, we were for most of it. And then I think like March and April, we started to come back a little bit. So yeah, what a tough position for the interns to be in. That was awful. It was awful. I mean, they probably learned a lot about technology, but boy, that was awful. But
As did
thanks
we
so much
all.
for that example. I really do. I think I do recall the conversation as well. So
It's hard to believe, right, that it was 4 years ago.
thanks. Yeah.
But you answered the phone. It was a Friday, and you were very available to me and answering my questions and providing me with direction. I have that lasting impression of you, and I do hope we meet one day in person.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
I would love that. And I live, I'm just outside of Worcester. But I'm so intrigued by the SEL initiative for adults that you mentioned. And what I'm wondering is, what does that look like specifically? How is the district going about identifying and engaging the individuals that will benefit, that will potentially benefit, right? How will you go about identifying who those individuals are? I work with parents that are involved with DCF and fighting for reunification with their children and fighting hard and they are disproportionately people of color. They're disproportionately people who are poor and lack many material things. And that population aside, when you think about SEL for adults, it just makes so much sense because it's adults who are raising children. Adults are raising children, right? And if only we still lived in a Mr. Rogers world, or we could bring him back. And, these are adults who, themselves may have not, and probably have not, benefited from learning the language of emotion. So that's my question, is who and how.
So if I could identify specifically certain people who I'm like, you need it, buddy.
Right, but you can't do that, right?
That would be ideal. But this was kind of a voluntary initiative. And we started with the secondary level, middle school and high school. And because honestly, for those who aren't familiar with, like a public school K through 12 setting, the elementary schools are the ones are kind of more nurturing. The staff too, are more nurturing. And as they get older, sometimes the staff feel like that the student should know this already. You know what I mean? So they may not be as open to like direct teaching in regards to what a middle schooler needs for SEL, right? Because just because you taught empathy in first grade doesn't mean that when you get to middle school that empathy's gone out the window. You still need to teach empathy, right? And how to be kind and so forth. So anyways, like the reality is that our middle school and some of our middle and high school staff are not there yet in regards to their own knowledge in regards to how important like the 5 competencies are, right? So that was why the secondary levels were identified to be targeted. And we went after the administrators and their leadership teams so that we're like, all right, we're going to get their buy-in. Like, we're going to just sell this baby. They're going to come, they're going to love it. And then they're going to bring that to their staff. So they'll bring the adult SEL lens to their staff. And so that, was the vision. And we had, I can share with you the trainer who came and trained us. She was magnificent, Gianna Cassetta. And I don't know if she's available, like, I don't know if she just does just schools, but at any rate, I can send it to you guys if you want. And so she, and in the district, we have what we call we have SEL coaches who I oversee as well. So I oversee the school adjustment counselors, social workers, and these 8 coaches, SEL coaches. And so Gianna trained us how to train the staff so that next year we'll be able to, like, so over the next 10 years, we'll be able to have some professional development throughout the district, and get to hopefully everybody at some point. Did that
That
answer?
sounds like it. Yeah, no, definitely. I like the way you're rolling it out. So you're starting within this structure, within the schools and at the top, right? So looking for those individuals that are in positions of making decisions about the allocation of resources and who gets what. They need to learn and understand the importance of social emotional learning, and that it have, that it be supported and sustained. I'm very shocked and sorry to hear about this upcoming deficit. That's big. That's not a small deficit.
No, it's going to be bad.
And we all know what ends up first on the chopping block.
Yep.
But I know you'll give it a good fight, Jean.
Although I think, fingers crossed. I don't know. I don't even want to say it out loud. I don't want to jinx anything. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
One last question, and again, related to my private work, wondering, I'm sorry to be selfish, I should be speaking more about my academic work, but this is academic too, right? It's all intersected. And these students know well, the work that I'm doing with parents that are fighting for reunification with their children and all of the hoops they need to jump through. But one thing that I'm retained mostly to do is to conduct parenting evaluations and be able to speak to fitness if a case should happen to go to trial. And, there's some okay parenting measures out there, but I would love to see one that incorporates something that would allow me to capture social emotional aptitude, and then therefore be able to identify where I can help that parent in their journey to reunite and to demonstrate fitness. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe I'll email you and ask you to send me if you happen to know of any measures, any tools or assessments.
For parents.
Sort of intersecting SEL and parenting, yes.
Let me think on that. Do me a favor though, shoot me an email because tomorrow is going to be whirlwind and then vacation, and I don't want to forget. So I'll talk to
I'll reach out to you.
Talk to a couple of school psychologist colleagues and see if they know of anything offhand too.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. It kind of leads us into our next question. Is kind of related. Someone from our audience wants to know, how would you include the parents in this type of project? Do you present this before the school year starts? And typically, how do parents feel about coming on board in a sense? And for the most part, are they eager to join and kind of wanting to learn how this works? Are they engaged in support at home? How have you seen things? I know you mentioned earlier that you include, or folks would include, people like the local person who runs a corner store and, wanting to include parents. So what have you seen so far?
So thank you for the question, because it brought up a thing that I completely didn't even address, and I should have. It was kind of big. So thank you, Dr. Reverend Robbie Clark. So currently in the district right now, we have, over the past several years, we have what's called Panorama, and it's like a platform that houses a lot of different stuff. But within Panorama, we have sent out surveys to families, students, and staff in regards to what their thoughts are on the culture and the climate of our buildings. And so then, and actually, we just got it back a little while ago, and we had a pretty decent parent response. There was a strong push from the superintendent to the principals saying, get these done, make sure that you all all of our languages, they were sent out in many different languages, and we made sure that that was available to all. And so we just get that back. So that's a little piece of how we kind of include our families in regards to this. When I mentioned earlier that the superintendent has, did listening sessions, but she also has continued to kind of, even at that top level, she has continued to maintain those relationships that she's built when she first started. And she's a busy lady. She's a very busy lady, but she makes the time to listen to the parents, and quite honest, she's really drawn in a lot of our community members to help support the work that we're doing in the district. So how do we?
That's
So
gonna
in
lead us
regards
into-
to, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So we draw them in by the survey. We also, like, quite honestly, in a building, and I'm hoping that this is happening, and I've seen it happening, so I'm hoping it gets throughout. But when families are coming in to have meetings about their students, it's discussed. But we have every fall, we have what we call Know Your School Night, which is where parents and the parents come in and they get to kind of meet the teachers and so forth and so on. And my staff, the school adjustment counselors, have been directed when they're having these nights is to incorporate SEL. Like, they'll have a table, right? So incorporate SEL and the importance of it, and have flyers, and throughout the buildings, most of the buildings have a lot of posters up to promote the competencies and stuff like that. So we work hard to get the families involved. And again, there are many barriers in regards to that as well, because there are many cultural issues that we're a very, very diverse city. And some cultures are not very comfortable talking about emotion and talking about mental health and well-being, and so those are some of the things that we try to just make sure that we build our relationship with the family no matter what, and so that they can trust us, right? So we want them to be able to know that we're going to take care of their kiddo, we care about their kiddo, and these are the things that we're going to do to help support that. So I hope I answered your question, Reverend.
I think you did, and you also sort of answered Cherie's question a little bit in there too. So I think that's great. It looks like we have another question by Reverend. They want to know, what is the typical reaction of most parents, and how has it changed since COVID? And I think that's an important question that you asked too, Reverend, because like you mentioned, Jean, some families might not be so welcoming, but it would be nice to know how things might have changed after COVID. Are they more open? What's the reaction now after COVID?
That's a really good question, and hard to answer specifically because everybody's different. Like, there are some families, like personally, that I knew, who were adamant that you don't talk to my kid about anything but school and academics. You just teach them math and I get the rest, right? And I found that some after COVID have been like, I can't believe the work that you guys do. You did, it's amazing the depth that you can get to. And everybody cares. And so there was that lens. And then after COVID, I also feel that many people kind of shut down. And I'm feeling like it's taking a little bit longer than I was hoping to kind of have folks open up. I think everybody went into their little hole, and it's taking some people longer to come out. And so I don't know, it's just hard. It's hard work engaging families. It's work. And
I
people
bet.
need to realize that that's something that needs to happen. You know, just like teaching kids, we need to engage families so that they're involved and they know what we're doing with the kiddos 6 hours, 6.5 hours of every day, you know? So we'll get there. By the time I retire,
Well, I mean, we have folks like us who are now, in our courses and prepared for the world. So I think the lessons that we're learning, the folks that we're falling behind, hopefully we can make a difference, 5 to 10 years from now.
yeah.
And it looks like Brianna has a question. Go for it, Brianna.
I do, because I'm coming at this at a very different lens.
Mhm.
I have my bachelor's of social work and I work in the Midwest. So like you have all the East Coast and then you get to the Midwest and
Mm.
and I work with adults primarily with either substance use or mental health issues. But a lot of them are still stuck in that teenage mindset. So like the core values and everything that you were talking about earlier, I'm like going, how do I apply that to the adults whose minds are still stuck at age 15?
I think honestly, if you just take each of those 5 competencies, right?
Mhm.
I'm throwing papers all over the place over here, but if you take each of the 5 competencies, like just start with, did you say you're working with substance use people?
Substance use, severe mental health, schizoaffective disorders.
Mhm. And then take the typical social work lens of start where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And relationship, I would assume that many relationships are struggling because of the substance abuse, and if you take each of the competencies and kind of see where your client is at
Mhm.
with that competency and then build it.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps to answer that.
That it does. It's because I'm also working on my certified alcohol and drug counselor certification at the same time. So it's like,
So you know more than me, yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
go that far, Jean. You've been in the field as long as I've been alive. So
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Brianna. Now, we have some time. So if we don't have any more questions, excuse me. If we don't have any more questions, I will pass along to my classmate, Caroline.
I have one question, sorry. It was too long to post, but again, I just go back because I did a lot of reading, particularly for Connecticut. And you may have said this already, so I apologize if I sound, like I'm duplicating, because being on this end and trying to present, it was kind of difficult to kind of listen to everything you were saying. But one of the things that that struck me from some of the stuff, the research that I read, was that it seemed like the most successful towns in Connecticut that were able to implement SEL and also sustain it, right, post-pandemic, are the towns that are the wealthiest. So, I mean, not surprising, but has that been your experience also in Worcester? And, any thoughts on, because I'm from the inner city. I grew up in Hartford. I raised my kids in Hartford. So for me, it's like, oh my God, where was this when my kids were, some of them have learning disabilities. So it's almost like, where was this, when I was raising my kids, so.
So there's a couple of things that are kind of wrapped around that question, right? So one of them is the money, and that's for sure. I mean, but we've been inundated with a lot of money here in Worcester, and we were able to start all of these fun little things. But now, what's going to happen now that the money's gone? So there's that piece. I also, quite honestly, I don't think it's all about the money either, because I think in a smaller town, even if they don't have a huge budget, but they have one elementary school, right? And they have the buy-in from the principal and the staff, and they don't have a lot of money. You don't need a lot of money to teach empathy. You know what I mean? You know, nowadays, quite honestly, when I was 5,000 years ago, when I was trying to get lessons and stuff, I didn't have, you know, the internet that I could bop into and just get all this stuff right now. So these, even the towns that don't have a lot of money, if they have the people who are invested, they'll make it happen, you know? And I think it's easier in a smaller town where, like here in Worcester, there's 40 something schools, right? Each building principal has, you know, their focus for the year, what they're gonna, you know, and they, quite honestly, you couldn't pay me enough to be a principal or a teacher. Thank God I'm a social worker. Each building has their things that need improvement, right? And a lot of it does revolve around testing, right? And they need to make sure that these kiddos pass MCAS or they're in trouble. You know what I mean? So those kinds of pressures put SEL back on the you know, in the back burner. But some of the buildings that realize that you're not going to be able to teach these kids until you deal with the SEL, right? Until they're stable and until they're regulated and ready to roll. They embrace it better. And, you know, I don't know about the test scores yet, but we'll see. You know, let's hope that data over time will show us. So yeah, I think it's money, I think it's investment, and I think it's mostly investment, actually, quite honestly. If you get a principal who's all over it, they're gonna do it.
Certainly helps to have
Yeah.
an invested community, right? As we've talked about, takes a village, as Maggie said. Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to pose one more question for the crowd. We are curious to hear what has been your takeaway from this event. So maybe tell us something that you're bringing with you into your next chapter, career, personal, about social emotional learning. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to respond. Okay, so Rain said, interesting to learn about it for adults. Yep, seeing solid tenets of SEL. Yep, remembering that it's for everybody, not just for kids. Definitely.
Just gonna pop in. The interesting thing about the SEL for adults, right, is I think we've done this, right? So as social workers, I always viewed my job as taking care of the students primarily, right? The
Mhm.
families, the staff. Like so if our staff aren't in a good space,
Right.
then they're not going to be able to do well with our kiddos either. So like the premise has been there. So I mean the adult SEL was like the wording was even new to me in regards to this training. So I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah, this is what we do, but it's so much bigger. You know what I mean? It was
Mhm.
really fascinating actually. So lucky to be able to have the training.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Cherie. Parent competency assessments don't capture social emotional competencies in general. Teachers should be the ones teaching social emotional learning. Okay, thank you, Reverend. Wishing that principals back in the day had these perspectives. Nuns at Catholic school, yes, absolutely. How to address behavior, right? We've really moved from different managing consequences and positive behavior supports. Dr. Clark, I still believe people believe in a people to people world. Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. All great remarks. And if anything else pops up, I'll be sure to flag it. I know Cherie wanted to share a social emotional learning quote. So I will hand it over to Cherie for that next part.
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I had just a couple of quotes I thought pertain, and I just thought I'd share them with you. If you have any others that you know of, feel free to put them in the chat because we love to learn from each other. The first one is actually from Aristotle. So talk about an old quote, right? That's been around for a while, or some old wisdom. And the quote is, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. The second one I had was actually from Mother Teresa, and it says, in this life, we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. And I think that speaks to that empathy that's so important and was talked about a lot tonight. And then finally, I couldn't resist putting in one of my favorite recent quotes. It was from the movie, and when I first heard this was going to be a movie, I must admit my initial reaction was, what? But it was the Barbie movie. And when I found out more that it was focused on the theme of empowerment of women and girls, I gave it a chance, and I'm glad I did. I like one of the quotes by, they have the Barbies up there, and they have the different careers that women can have. And so the lawyer Barbie, who's played by Sharon Rooney, reflects after a speech that she's giving in, I don't know if it's Barbie Congress or what it is, in front of a bunch of legislators. She says, "This makes me emotional, and I'm expressing it. I have no difficulty holding both logic and feeling at the same time, and it does not diminish my powers, it expands them." And then there was a reflection on that by someone named Brittany Garcia Dumas, who identifies herself as a proud Latina and feminist, according to her TikTok bio. And she reacted to that saying, "My access to emotions, whatever range that may be, is an asset to all my roles in life. It does not falter my ability to be an expert or leader. It is what makes me a more expansive and diversified community member." So I thought those were interesting, and I wanted to share them with you. Again, please feel free to share some more with us. And you can also share reflections in your survey after the webinar closes. But before, in closing, I'd like to turn the program over to my esteemed colleague, Maggie Font.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending the seminar. This is actually part of our final project before Cherie and myself and Caroline graduate. So we'll be graduating in May. Amen to that. And so we do have a survey. We really, really would love for you to complete that survey for us. That will actually, after this, we have to put a presentation together as well, and also write a paper. So that will help us in terms of to kind of show what the learning was, and we'll have access to the results as well. So if you could do that for us, it'll pop up, I think, in the chat. The last thing is, so we want to also encourage you to check out the New England MHTTCC for future webinars, events, and any technical assistance opportunities and links to other technology transfer centers across the US. We want to thank you again. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. And also we want to thank Jean. Thank you so much for saying yes. And you showed up, you were just fully present, and I'm excited. This has been wonderful. And also Dr. Clark, our wonderful professor. who has been amazingly just supportive, and also the team, Dante, Caroline, and Cherie. We did it. So thank you so much, everyone.
It was a good night for social work, a good night for social emotional learning. I really I really like the format that you went with. The questions, you know, on the slides with the opportunity for Jean to respond to each. It was a smart way to format the presentation. I won't give you all feedback now. We can wait till we meet next. Our last meeting, our last class, boo-hoo. But yay for you, right? You're within very close reach of that stage that you'll be walking across on May 11th. So bravo, good job, you guys.
And go to the
Thank
DESE
you.
website if you want to be a school adjustment counselor and see what you need to do.
Yes.
Because they have specific licenses that you have to get. So if you're interested, go to the Mass DESE or Connecticut DESE and find out what you need to do to get that licensure.
From one social worker to another, ladies, congrats on your upcoming graduation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Okay,
night.
signing off. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jean.